We've solved the compute problem. It used to be very hard to get dedicated block space for your app, right? It would have meant, project back to when we founded this company 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Like what that meant generally was like you're building your own Cosmos chain. You're finding a bunch of independent people to validate your chain. You're incentivizing that with massive token inflation to those validators. You're developing your own custom software with the Cosmos SDK. You need to hire a bunch of protocol engineers. You need to hire a bunch of developer relations folks. You need to coordinate all these node operators. You need to hire some DevOps people yourself. We've basically collapsed that entire problem into like a 10-minute deploy process.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by WAGMI Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Hey everyone, Benga here with WAGMI Ventures podcast. On today's episode, we have Matt Katz, the co-founder, Caldera, the roll-up deployment platform. For anyone who is new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders and founders across Web3, crypto, and artificial intelligence. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. Thank you for joining us. Let's get to it. Matt, absolutely great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
Nice. Lots to unpack here today with you. Love for you to introduce yourself and just share with our audience your crypto journey. How did it all begin?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm Matt, co-founder, CEO of Caldera. We are one of the leading roll-up deployment platforms on top of Ethereum. I got into crypto. I think my journey is both fairly typical and also very atypical. I got into crypto at a very young age, probably at the age of about 10 or 11 years old, mostly kind of like in the late sort of like PHP, BB internet forum era. So somehow stumbled into like the Bitcoin community, got very interested in that because I was doing a lot of just random things online. I was kind of a script kiddie. So I would write small programs, sell them, trade like video game assets, etc. online. When you're doing a lot of those things at around that time, you eventually stumble into like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Got deeper into that at around that time. It was like the kind of main social hub for crypto was a forum called Bitcoin Talk. So got deeper there. And funnily enough, the main thing that was going on back then, for folks who are around, they'll remember, was creating new blockchains, just what we do today. So of course, like Litecoin and Dogecoin were just examples of that, where people basically forking Bitcoin blockchain client code, making an entirely new blockchain with an entirely new coin, launching it to the community, etc. So it's kind of like a full circle moment almost for me to be doing what I'm doing right now. Anyway, during that cycle, I ended up losing all my crypto in Mt. Gox, which was sort of like the FTX of that like 2010 to 2012 or 2013 cycle. Kind of at that time, kind of got disillusioned with the crypto space. Obviously, I'd lost a lot of money, but still remained programming. So all throughout high school and then college, spent a lot of time just writing code. Anything from like a little bit of distributed systems to programming language work to doing more like general full stack things, writing open source code for financial institutions in developing countries like microbanks, et cetera, that they could use. That brought me to Stanford in 2019, 2020, where I went very deep on a lot of my academic interests around computer science, things like distributed systems, programming language theory, a little bit of like embedded systems, operating systems, virtual machines, et cetera, and a little bit of cryptography. And when you have all those interests at around those times, you kind of end up in crypto, because crypto is where all the interesting innovation is happening at kind of the intersection of all of those fields. So got back into crypto at around that time, spent a little bit of time with folks who are building really cool things at the application layer. So things like fully on-chain games, initial experiments around on-chain social, et cetera. And that both kind of got me back into crypto and also provided a lot of the initial inspiration for Caldera, because a lot of those applications that I was seeing being built, like they really needed modular blockchains to scale.
Thank you for that. I mean, 10 years old, you have to be by far the youngest start into crypto on this show. I heard 10 years old. I heard Mt. Gox. Quite a journey, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it was very traumatizing as a kid. Like I had literally put my entire life savings, right, which is like the birthday money that my parents had saved up for like 10 years into Bitcoin, lost it all in Mt. Gox. And so at the time, it was like a really It's really funny to look back on, right? Because it wasn't a lot of money, right? It was on the order of about 1 Bitcoin when that happened, which is about like, I think a little under $1,000. But I feel like it provided a lot of resilience for building in crypto right now because like I've been through the cycle and literally losing all my money. And so the recent market downturn really hasn't had a lot of emotional effect on me.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's still very much a powerful story and journey into crypto. I think you had shared there that led to the inspiration behind Caldera and building in the modular ecosystem. And just so we can frame today's conversation as we dive into details of your project, can you give us some background on the modular ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say like this concept of modular blockchains, the best way to describe it are that modular blockchains are blockchains where the core consumer of the resources that those blockchains are providing are themselves other blockchains, right? So they're blockchains built for blockchains, not blockchains built as a full stack solution for people or for all developers, et cetera, right? So if you look at the initial blockchains that have been built, people would say they're built in a very monolithic way, right? So like Bitcoin, everyone at the time was expected to run a Bitcoin client. And the idea is that users are actually using Bitcoin to send money around, right? Then Ethereum evolved on this concept where now there's like a general purpose virtual machine. So people can write programs on the blockchain. We call those smart contracts. And those programs are self-executing. They exist on the network. And the idea is that the network, both this kind of underlying substrate, right, for like computation, and there's like a networking stack behind it, right, and data is being passed to all these different nodes, but also users are interacting directly with the chain and with the apps on the chain. This is in pretty stark contrast to what I think many people would say is the first modular blockchain, Celestia, where Celestia was focused entirely on DA, right? If you're a user and you have some Celestia, maybe you qualified for the airdrop, but you're not a developer of rollups or you're not building a blockchain yourself, there's very little you can do with your TIA tokens. And that's by design because it's a blockchain that's like purpose built to offer like a single service to other blockchains so that other blockchains don't need to worry about data availability, which was like a problem that every blockchain before needed to solve independently. Now they can just plug into Celestia, rely on that, and offload that concern. And so that is kind of the concept of modularity in general, like building blockchains out of blockchains. And so now we're seeing a lot of different types of modular blockchains basically existing at every layer of the stack. Of course, there are a lot more solutions for DA right now. Some of them are blockchains like Celestia. Some of them aren't necessarily blockchains, but they are still like modular components that blockchains are using. EigenDA is like an example of that. We're seeing modularity at the sequencer level, right? So teams like Espresso are launching a blockchain that is purpose-built just for sequencing transactions and then also interoperability based on the properties of that blockchain that's sequencing transactions. And like rollups can now take that service that's provided with Espresso and also integrate it. So that's like the general concept of modularity. I think the thing that's really powerful in the current context with rollups and modular blockchains is that modular blockchains make it a lot cheaper and a lot easier to spin up and operate a blockchain. With rollups we saw on Ethereum, fees could still be fairly expensive. There are still a lot of different applications that were being priced out of Ethereum land. And because basically the biggest cost for rollups was data availability. And that's just like you need somewhere to put the data on the chain that's public. You can prove that it's like public and being made available. Because if that data doesn't exist anywhere or it only exists in some like database somewhere, then you have a pretty weak link in the security model of the chain. And so now with all the big explosion of data availability that was, again, brought on by Celestia and other players as well, it's become a lot less expensive to spin up your own chain. And that's kind of led to the big explosion we see right now of like all these new chains, some of which are like purpose built for specific applications, some of which are just targeting specific ecosystems, et cetera. But like it radically lowered the cost for launching your own chain.
Yeah, that's excellent background there. Thank you so much. You talk a lot about the explosion in the chains and how Celestia has largely, among other players, solved that data availability piece or component. And I think it's a good segue to talk about how Caldera comes into the mix here and what unique solutions it's trying to solve. You recently raised $15 million from Founders Fund, Sequoia, Dragonfly, to name a few. Congratulations. If you could just tell us what your project does, how it fits into the mix here, what problem it seeks to solve, and how you guys are thinking about making the roll up deployment space more efficient.
Yeah. So I like to think of us as like immediately downstream of the modular blockchain revolution. You can almost think of like it's a sort of imperfect analogy, but you can think of all the, the modular components that are being built, sort of like new like operating system components being built, like a kernel, right, firmware, etc. I would say like we are the like PC builders or like server builders that are taking those components and making them accessible to developers and to users. So Caldera, like we're founded basically to provide horizontal scalability to the blockchain ecosystem. What that means in practice is like we want to be the easiest way for someone to launch their own customizable, dedicated, and cost-effective chain. So practically what that means right now, you go to our portal or you contact us, you book a demo, you go through our sales process. What we do is like we will work with teams, figure out their requirements, figure out why they want to launch a chain, what they're going to put on a chain, etc. Help design a spec for a blockchain, and then ultimately deploy and run that customizable blockchain on behalf of a team. So we're both, on one hand, kind of like an infrastructure layer. We run the rollup sequencer, which is like the node that actually validates transactions and produces blocks. We run validators for the network that are making sure the sequencer is acting honestly. We provide RPCs that those chains can use either themselves, or they can provide to external developers to allow them to like access the chain, add the chain to MetaMask, deploy smart contracts, etc. And then we also just provide a litany of other tools, some of which we host ourselves, like a Block Explorer, and some of which we loop in third-party players for, right? So for like subgraphs, data indexing, third-party bridging, like Layer 0, Hyperlane, etc. Like we are kind of the entry point for a lot of these projects that are launching their own chain to find and discover a lot of those third-party infra providers. So basically, like we are kind of like the entry point to the modular ecosystem. People come to us, they say, I need a chain for XYZ. And we're with them basically from ideation to launch to beyond and scaling their chain. We're with them every step of the way to help get them to a live chain in production on mainnet.
That's pretty cool. Hey, everybody, quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show. I mean, I'm familiar with a number of the projects that you guys have already supported and are supporting today. Do you want to name a few of those and then sort of like leverage that into Caldera's value prop and how you're enabling growth and scaling of the ETH ecosystem?
Yeah. So yeah, a few of the biggest names we work with are like Manta. We run their EVM chain, Manta Pacific, Herrick, Kinto, which is like a KYC L2, Sanko, which is a really cool like L3 gaming ecosystem on Arbitrum. And we have a bunch of teams we're working with that aren't yet live, teams that you've probably heard of, like Ape Chain, which is by the ApeCoin Bored Ape DAO, Treasure Chain, Zero Chain by Zerion, B3, which is making a lot of waves right now. Yeah, like I think generally like, the value prop for a lot of these folks that we're working with, one of the commonalities between them, and we have a really diverse customer base, but the one kind of commonality is like they have really solid go-to-market. They have a really good idea of like what they want to build. But like most teams in Web3, they don't want to build out an entire like DevOps infrastructure team in order to do it. Most teams that are really good at building applications in this space, they have great full stack devs. They have great smart contract devs. They have some good backend devs to provide maybe kind of auxiliary services like a customizable indexer for their app. What they really don't want to be doing is like getting dirty with like Kubernetes and like wrangling AWS services, et cetera, and making sure that their chain has like 5 nines of uptime, being on a call constantly, et cetera. It's a really big undertaking for any individual team to do. And so like the value prop that we provide is basically providing all of that as a service in a box and with like the expertise of a team that's been working on this for like 2.5 years now, understands intricately how rollups work, how to monitor for them, how to make changes and customizations to rollups, what is possible now, what will be possible in the future, etc. So basically, we are kind of like DevOps in a box for a lot of these teams.
And I can absolutely see the value out there, and the value proposition is you start to build a lot of these chains on top of blockchains, right? You'd alluded to that earlier in how you view the scaling and a lot of the work that you're doing today within the ETH ecosystem. Is there any plans to go beyond ETH as you kind of think through your vision and roadmap?
Yeah. So we started in ETH because ETH is probably the most like value aligned community with horizontal scaling. Of course, there was Cosmos, which kind of created this idea of app chain. So I guess they're the first. But when it comes to like rollups and providing blockchains as a service, ETH has really embraced this idea of kind of giving up a little bit of control and optimizing for having like an ecosystem of new chains flourishing on top of it as like L2s and L3s. And so it made sense for us to start on ETH, and that's kind of where we consider our home to be. That said, there's like now an absolute like ton of innovation that's happening in other ecosystems. Everyone who's been in Web3 over the past year or so has seen Bitcoin L2s be a huge thing. There are a ton of different designs, different VMs, et cetera, being built on Bitcoin, but like that space has really taken off. And it seems like at least a large subset of the Bitcoin community has really embraced L2s. I expect the same thing to happen with Ton, like the Telegram network. We're watching that space with a lot of interest as well, just because it's another really big chain with a non-EVM environment. And when that happens, I think the very natural question that people will ask is like, well, how do I deploy my Ethereum apps? Like if I want to deploy Uniswap or Aave to on Ton. And so we're looking at both those ecosystems with a lot of interest. We don't have like concrete plans right now to expand into those places, but I imagine at some point in the future, we probably will if the activity in these ecosystems keep up. Because really, like, as I mentioned before, our goal is just help scale blockchains, provide developers choice. And some developers are going to want to build on Bitcoin. And who are we to tell them they shouldn't? So we will definitely continue watching those ecosystems.
And how are you assessing like what that looks like today? It definitely sounds like demand driven, right? And where you're seeing most of the developer activity, just given the size and scale of ETH. Is that what's driving what chains, what L1s you are considering as part of the roadmap?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've always been a very customer and user first company. And so all of our decisions are basically demand driven, either by current demand or like our prediction on future demand. We're not afraid to like make kind of like speculative bets and kind of conviction based bets on new ecosystems or new stacks if we believe that to be the right thing and there will be a lot of demand in the future. But like we basically take the data we're operating on is like user data. And then that's also weighted by how difficult or easy it is for us and our current architecture to support. And that's the kind of other side of the equation for a lot of these new building a rollup on Bitcoin or on Ton. It's a real like non-trivial undertaking from an engineering perspective. And so we're biding our time right now. We're watching with a lot of interest. And I think like when we think it makes the most sense, we will enter those spaces.
Got it. Yeah, no, it certainly sounds extremely technical. It sounds like at least for the solving for the infrastructures piece, definitely sounds very high level, smart stuff. Like, and as you guys sort of build through this and assess where the demand is, think through how you want to start to scale your infrastructure, where do you see the challenges? I mean, it'd be interesting to sort of understand how you guys are thinking about what those challenges look like and how you're thinking of solving them as well.
Yeah, so I think this is a good time for me to talk about this initiative we're calling the meta layer, which we recently unveiled in fairly general terms to the world alongside our fundraising announcement. So I think like just like with regular computing, there's kind of like always two problems to solve at the end of the day. One is compute and one is networking. We saw this with the cloud space. Some problems are inherently like kind of compute bound. Ton of examples, but like one might be like training an AI model, right? Or doing some like fairly complex math or even like running a game on your PC locally, for example, like rendering